Dear friends, the Greek Committee for International Detente and Peace, EEDYE, thank you for the initiative to organize this meeting and the invitation to participate in it. If there are three words that could describe the behavior of those who are in power today and rule the world, those are irrationality, cynicism, and hypocrisy. Irrationality because it is absurd for the 1% of the Earth's population to hold 99% of its wealth. Cynicism because in the logic of social Darwinism, it is argued that this is how it should be. And hypocrisy because in the logic of social consensus, it is argued that there can be capitalism with a humane face. Today, the permanent threat for the rights and needs for all peoples, and for that matter, for the peoples of Eastern Mediterranean, is none other than the common denominator of both the domestic and foreign policy of each country's government, which is the protection and maximization of capital profitability. The specific aspects of this policy do not change its strategic targeting that serves the interests of the 1% against the interests of the 99% who are the producers of wealth plundered by the 1%. In the international arena and in the wider Eastern Mediterranean region, the rivalries between powerful capitalist states and alliances, such as the USA, NATO, European Union, Russia, China, with the involvement of many other states, are intensifying. At stake are energy resources, their transport routes, and telecommunication networks, markets, sphere of influence, and lately the COVID vaccine. Nationalism is flaring up, and in the logic of divide and rule is used as a tool in the service of business groups. The countries of North Africa, the Middle East, and the Persian Gulf control more than 60% of the world's hydrocarbon reserves, and about 15 oil and gas pipelines run through the Middle East, the Black Sea, and the Eastern Mediterranean. It is this controversy that has painted its roads with the blood of the people, and this is because, like everything else in capitalism, energy resources are commodities for sale with the aim of profit, not social goods. The economic basis of these practices is evident since the military operations go hand in hand with the investment plans of large financial groups. This is the reason for the bloodshed in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Ukraine, and most recently in Nagorno-Karabakh, with thousands of dead and wounded people, tens of thousands of refugees, and huge material disasters, among them many important cultural monuments. This is the reason for the waves of thousands of refugees and immigrants fleeing to save their lives from imperialist war or to escape from the poverty of imperialist peace in quotation marks, of course. The European Union, as an exponent of the interests of energy groups, while importing without restriction the products of plunder of energy resources, renewable and non-renewable, from the countries of their origin, fortifies itself in land and sea to prevent human beings who were driven out from their homes by the imperialist wars, but also by the imperialist peace at gunpoint, from reaching its shores and borders. At the same time, the European Union is declaring its commitment to human rights, democracy, and freedom. This is how cynicism and hypocrisy coexist. Actually, the European Union opens and closes the faucet of flow of refugees and immigrants based on the needs of European business groups for cheap labor, regardless if they are refugees or immigrants. In 2015-16, it needed and got about 1.5 million of them. It does not need any more today. Thus, its aim is to prevent them from entering the European Union. This is also the purpose of distinction between refugees and immigrants. If, however, some people enter, it tries by all means to confine them in the countries of first entry, such as Greece, and in the regions of first entry, such as the islands of Eastern Aegean. EEDYE, the Greek Committee for International Detente and Peace, demands disenclavement from the islands and the country of all refugees and immigrants. No detention center, no concentration camp, open or closed in Lesbos or in any other island. Move them to the mainland, to places with humane safety and hygiene conditions for their temporary accommodation until they are given the appropriate documents to go to their countries of destination, recognizing the right to apply for asylum there. The rivalry between the powerful capitalist economies, mainly the USA, European Union, Japan, with the dynamically developing capitalist economies of China, Russia, India, etc., beyond the field of energy resources concerns other fields. The main field of rivalry with China is who will lead in the new technologies and artificial intelligence, where China is running at a fast pace. The dispute with Russia is more traditional and concerns the European Union's dependence on Russian oil and gas. The European Union imports 58% of its energy it consumes, of the energy it consumes. From Russia comes 30% of its oil and 40% of its natural gas. The United States is seeking the non-implementation of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which will connect Germany and Russia and will increase its energy dependency from Russia, which currently covers 25% of Germany's total energy needs. The reason is evident: to advance the interests of the US energy giants in general and the liquefied natural gas LNG sector in particular. In this context, the European Union is called upon to play a dual role. On the one hand, as NATO's European pillar, complementary to the US, and on the other, to strengthen its autonomous intervention as described by the European Union's common security and defense policy in order to advance the interests of its own monopolies in the Western Balkans, Eastern Mediterranean, Sub-Saharan Africa. The common security and defense policy is the operational arm of its European Union's common foreign and security policy, and both are linked inextricably to the treaty establishing the European Union, the Maastricht Treaty, and the Economic and Monetary Union. The Lisbon Treaty deepened the militarization of the imperialist aggressiveness of the European Union through the effort to strengthen its common imperialist foreign policy and the establishment of the joint military forces. It is characteristic that the European Union, through the common security and defense policy, established the so-called Petersburg Mission, which is the European Union's right to intervene politically and militarily around the world with rapid reaction forces, the battle groups. Upgraded the European Defense Agency with tasks of streamlining the military capabilities of the member states, coordinating research activities, improving the efficiency of military spending. Introduced and extended the mechanism of the Permanent Structured Cooperation, PESCO, where a group of member states can cooperate militarily, pursuing a common armaments policy and harmonizing military needs. It set up a permanent group of rapid reaction military forces ready to intervene militarily in every country on the planet, even despite the opposition of governments of some European Union member states. Adopted the US doctrine of precautionary war, establishing the right to intervene politically and militarily within the territory of any third country to prevent terrorist attacks, prevent conflict, and maintain peace. Maintain peace. The Solidarity Clause guarantees the right of the European Union to intervene militarily and politically in the internal developments even of its member states under the pretext of combating terrorist threats and terrorism. Terrorism is for the European Union the best pretext for its imperialist interventions and the shielding of its bourgeois system. The aim is the struggle against radicalization and extremist ideologies, which practically means the intensification of anti-communism and effort to neutralize labor and people's movement. The strengthening of the counter-terrorism alliance with the USA and the improvement of its so-called external dimension, which is the militarily political interventions in third countries, are considered of strategic importance. In the framework of the counter-terrorism group, within the Council of the European Union, discussions were held with USA, Russia, Canada, Australia, Pakistan, Yemen, etc. In 2013, the European Parliament adopted, and in the following years, with summary procedures, filed the demand for the imperialist principle of responsibility to protect, which was the pretext for the war in Libya, to become a UN rule. Measures are being promoted to make the differences between the military and civilian operations and interventions even less visible, as well as to expand the scope of intervention by establishing the position of the European Union's human rights representative and a corresponding clause in all European Union's agreements with third parties. The report on the maritime dimension of the common security and defense policy paved the way for the development of the European Maritime Forces, the EUROMAR-4, where the present Operation EEDYE and its predecessor, Operation Sophia, belong under the pretext of protecting the routes of energy, trade, arms, and refugees, but with the main purpose of preventing the actions of the rising capitalist powers that question the omnipotence of traditional naval empires. The rivalries and the competitions between sections of the capital in each country, as well as the uneven development of countries in the realm of the capitalist system, and especially in conditions of generalized economic crisis, result in the development of rivalries between the USA and between the USA and Germany, Germany and France, or Italy, creating problems within NATO and the European Union. The relations between Greece and Turkey are moving in the context of the competition of their ruling classes for their geostrategic upgrade, which are claiming an even greater share of the loot against the interests of the peoples of both countries. Turkey's aggression is escalating constantly and does not only concern the Aegean, but extends to a wider region where Turkey is seeking to play an upgraded role. Turkey is a big country, and it is a strong capitalist state. It has a large army. It has intervened twice in Syria, apart from Iraq, where it maintains occupying military forces as it does in Cyprus. It has military bases in Somalia and Qatar, and uses religious affiliation in its alliance policy. Turkey is conducting an overall bargaining in the context of the most complex developments in the Middle East, Eastern Mediterranean, Iraq, Syria, and is exploiting the rivalries between NATO, European Union, and Russia. It claims to secure its position in conditions where scenarios for redrawing borders are open. It challenges treaties and borders. It claims a role in controlling sea roads and hydrocarbon pipelines, and most important, in the exploitation plans of energy deposits in the Greek and the Cypriot continental shelf. And it is not accidental that any proposals for resolving the Cyprus issue are based on the proposal for joint exploration of energy deposits. It claims influence in the Balkan countries. It leverages its weight as an important power in the region as a state with NATO's second largest army. In the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean, the Turkish government is challenging the sovereignty of the Greek islands and their sovereign rights over the continental shelf and the exclusive economic zone. A typical example is the Memorandum of Understanding between Turkey and Libya on maritime borders, signed in December 2019, that directly questions the sovereign rights of Greece, Cyprus, and Egypt, laying the ground for the creation of fait accompli in the context of the doctrine of the blue homeland, promoted by the Turkish bourgeoisie. Oruç Reis plows the area. Drilling rigs violate the Cypriot continental shelf, and there is a threat of drilling in maritime zones that are part of the Greek continental shelf and exclusive economic zone. The aggression of the Turkish government, despite verbal condemnations, is not only tolerated by the US, NATO, and the European Union, but is also encouraged, as the Aegean is considered as a single operational area where there are no borders between the countries. It is indicative, the latest State Department report that clearly states that the United States does not recognize the 10 miles of Greek airspace, and therefore the violations by Turkey of Greek airspace between 6 and 10 miles. At the same time, the attitude of the European Union is also revealing as it avoids sanctions against Turkey at all costs due to the very strong military and economic relations various member states maintain with Turkey. It is worth noticing that Germany, Spain, the Netherlands, and a number of European Union states maintain multi-billion euros economic relations with Turkey. They have huge direct investments and contribute to Turkey's supply with weapons and weapon systems. In that context, the European Union follows an equal distance attitude and calls for dialogue, and thus is paving the way for painful compromises in the Aegean and Cyprus, with the ultimate goal of co-exploiting energy resources under Euro-Atlantic supervision and the partition of Cyprus. This attitude of the allies dispels any myths put forward by the Greek governments and the Greek bourgeoisie parties said that the US, NATO, and the European Union are factors of security, stability, and peace. The reality is that the US, NATO, and the European Union, with the ever-differing sanctions, agree that Turkey should remain in the Western camp and not push itself further into the arms of Russia and China. Despite their criticism for non-compliance with international rules on its part, in every way, they are pressuring Greece to continue in this direction, and through overt or covert negotiations to accept the joint exploitation of the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean, as well as the partition of Cyprus, which Turkey has been steadily promoting since 1974. This demand is not an excessive ambition of the Sultan Erdogan, but a constant claim of Turkey's ruling class. The recent visit of Erdogan in Varose, in the buffer zone of Famagusta, is another link in the escalation of Turkish aggression, and irremediably exposes all those countries nurturing Turkish aggression in order to serve their own interests. In practice, what our allies are seeking is to kill two birds with one stone. One is for their energy monopolies to be able to exploit the energy wealth of the region unhindered, giving some crabs in the context of co-exploitation to the Turkish and Greek monopolies. The other is to keep Turkey as a strategic partner in the Western camp, for which any sacrifice on the part of Greece is not only desirable, but imperative. After all, the agreements signed by Greece with Italy and Egypt for the determination of the respective exclusive economic zones violate the principle of full influence of the islands in the sovereign rights in the exclusive economic zone, while in the agreement with Italy, the sovereignty in territorial waters is violated, since Italian fishermen will be able to fish within the 12 miles of the Greece's territorial waters, thus paving the way for a painful and dangerous compromise for the Greek people, and we are referring a painful compromise with Turkey. In particular, the claim that the agreement with Egypt cancels the unacceptable Turkish-Libyan memorandum seeks to simplify a very complex situation characterized by cross-competition, which triggers Turkish aggressiveness and increases tensions in the region. The Greece-Egypt agreement is clearly part of the overall US, NATO, European Union aspirations and paves the way for the joint exploitation with Turkey in the Aegean and the maritime zones east of the 28th meridian, with or without the appeal to the Hague Tribunal. It does not correspond to reality, the cultivated expectation that the friend of Greece, Democrat Bidenopoulos, as they call him, will support the Greek positions in contrast to the Republican Trump, Erdogan's friend. As consistent is the policy of the Turkish governments, equally consistent and even more so is the policy of the American governments in promoting the interests of the American business groups, regardless of any personal peculiarities. Equally consistent is the policy of the Greek governments, most recently of Syriza and New Democracy, which, serving the interests of Greek business groups, have filled Greece with military bases, turning it into a base of imperialist interventions and wars, but at the same time to a magnet of retaliation attacks. Furthermore, Greece is sending armed forces on missions abroad. In the same context of the geostrategic upgrading of the interests of the Greek ruling class are the tripartite meetings between Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, and Greece, Cyprus, Israel, the state killer of the Palestinian people, which supposedly ensure the safety, defense, and sovereignty of the country. These schemes, with the participation and under the umbrella of the USA, are directly related to the energy plans that are in progress in the EastMed pipeline. They serve the interests of the economic groups such as French Total, the Italian Eni, the American ExxonMobil, but also other joint ventures with Israel, represented by the governments of these countries and the strategic plans of the USA and the European Union. In this context, it is no coincidence that in this region there are strong conflicts and rivalries which coexist with the threats of the Turkish leadership, thus increasing the dangers for the people. It has historically been proven that energy rivalries have led to the imperialist interventions and wars, such as those in Syria, Iraq, and Libya. At the same time, we are particularly concerned about the growing upgrading of the strengthening of Greece's economic, political, and military cooperation with Israel, the ongoing training with the armed forces of Greece and other countries, which are clearly war preparations. Israel is a strong capitalist state with a strong economic and military presence in the region, seeking to play a role in the ongoing competition. It murders the Palestinian people, continues the settlements and annexation of Palestinian territories, acts as a destabilizing factor in the wider Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean region, supporting US plans. Let us be clear that the Eastern Mediterranean, as in other regions, that in the Eastern Mediterranean, as in other regions, the tone is set by the imperialist. The tone is set by the imperialist rivalry and the actions of the US and NATO to limit the influence of Russia and China, and which are the main competitors of US and NATO. In this direction, and for serving precisely this interest, Greece has already been filled with NATO military bases, and a plan for the partition and NATOization of Cyprus is being promoted. The foundations for the joint exploitation of the Eastern Mediterranean, Aegean, and the Aegean have been set to the detriment of the country's sovereign rights. That is why it is vitally important for our people and the people of the region to defend their own interests and to strengthen their struggle against the bourgeoisie, the imperialist alliances and unions. The Greek people must not accept a painful compromise, but neither must they shed their blood for the interests of the Greek bourgeoisie. Only if the peoples take into their own hands, the power, will they be able to live peacefully and exploit wealth and put in the service of their own interests. Today, the first issue is the preservation of the borders and the conditions that the treaties that define them. The right to extend territorial waters to 12 miles is a right for every country, provided by the international law of the sea. But the exercise of this right, if done in the context of the general anti-people's policy, can further complicate the situation, fuel competition, and endanger our people and other peoples. So, how can normality be established? That is, how can the 99% meet all its contemporary needs and rights, which the development of science, technology, and economy today allows, more than ever, to be satisfied? How can they live peacefully and cooperate with other peoples on the basis of mutual benefit? The answer is simple, despite difficulties in its implementation. When the 99%, that is the peoples, take in each country the power in their hands, with whatever that demands and implies. Imperialist states, imperialist unions have a common enemy, the peoples, the working class, all those that challenge the capitalist mode of production. They have differences between them, but they are united against this common enemy. As experience has shown over the years, the distinction between good and bad imperialists, the establishment of the European Union, the embellishment of the European Union as something different from the US and NATO do not correspond to reality. USA, NATO, and the European Union are the armed hand of capitalism against peoples, and their actions are engraved with blood from one end of the planet to the other. The dangerous developments for the Greek and for all peoples signal the necessity and importance of the mobilization of new forces in the anti-imperialist, anti-war movement. EEDYE, the Greek Committee for International Detente and Peace, actively participates in the World Peace Council and has its own contribution in the international cooperation and anti-imperialist struggle of the peoples. In our neighborhood, with the particular problems caused by the Turkish bourgeoisie, the peoples tend a friendship hand to each other. They know who wants them to be the pawn in their plans, cheap fuel in their war machine. The anti-imperialist peace movement takes a fighting position on the side of the class-oriented workers and people's movement to claim its contemporary rights and needs against war and its generator, imperialism. EEDYE, with all its might, is fighting for the disengagement of our country from the dangerous plans of the imperialist states and organizations of the US, NATO, and the European Union, to close all foreign military bases in Greece, to free ourselves from these organizations with the people in power, owner of the wealth it produces. This is the only way to go if we are to live in justice and peace, as each one of the two is prerequisite and result of the other. Thank you.